Welcome to the Plant Cunning Podcast,
where we explore a relationship to plants, other people, and the mysteries of nature.
Coming to you from the high Allegheny Plateau in central New York.
We are your hosts, A.C. Stauble
and Isaac Hill. Episode 18, Restoring the Earth, with Michael Pilarski. In this episode, we speak with Michael about studying permaculture with Bill Mollison back in the 80s. About the intersection of science and woo, about working with nature spirits, about his Restore the Earth party, and how you can actually make some money growing herbs in a regenerative way. We'd also like to give a shout out to our first monthly sponsor, April. Thank you, April. And if you didn't know, you can support us on Anchor or Spotify. I'm actually not sure how you can do it, but we'll figure it out. You can also support us by sharing this podcast widely with your friends who you think might like it, and rating us on iTunes. Also, as we were ordering seeds for this spring, I noticed that a lot of seed companies are out of a lot of seeds. We actually have a lot of calendula and Tulsi seeds. So if you would like some free seeds, be one of the first 10 people to email us at plantcunning@gmail.com with your address, and we'll send you some seeds. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome, Michael Pilarski, to the Plant Cunning Podcast. We're very excited to talk with you today. I first learned about you about 10 years ago when I first got into permaculture, and you had videos up with Paul Wheaton, way back then. And you had some really interesting videos, and I learned a lot. And then I got to meet you at the 2016 Permaculture Convergence, like the North American Permaculture Convergence. And that was really great too. So I'm wondering, you do so many things, like you're an ethnobotanist, you're a herb farmer, wild crafter, educator, organizer. But it seems like most of this revolves around working with plants and working with people. And I wondered, how did you get into this? How did you get onto the green path, the plant path?
Well, to answer that question, I'll have to go back to, my very early childhood, where I grew up on the edges of a small town in Michigan, and got to play in the woods as a little child. And as I got older, though, I could cover bigger distances and go further afield. But I always had that secret little place to go play in the woods with the other kids, and the adults didn't bother us. So that, I think, that goes all the way back to that love that was enkindled in me because I got to be in nature. And so that's why it's important that all children have the opportunity to spend time in nature, because it might help affect their attitude toward plants in later life. And then I decided in the fourth grade that I was going to be a naturalist. So I was a great reader as a young one. And by the time I was in fourth grade, I had already decided my career path was going to be a naturalist. I was going to be a scientist working with nature and with plants and organisms. And I would travel to faraway places and have adventures being a naturalist. And I would probably write and teach. And so I carried that goal to college and went to university for 3 years. But that was right in the thick of the anti-war movement, for the Vietnam anti-war movement, and so I became radicalized by hanging out with the right kind of people at the university, and I ended up dropping out of school in protest of the bombing of Cambodia. That particular point. And so after that, I decided I wanted to help to be an activist working for change with who's controlling the dominant paradigm. And after a few years of that, I someone asked me if I wanted to work on a farm.
Ah.
And I said, well, okay. I said, I'll come for 2 weeks. And then I went out there for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I said, well, I'll stay for the whole growing season, but then I have to go back to the city then. And at the end of the growing season, I said, heck, I'm just going to stay out here and be an activist in the country.
Yeah.
And grow food and have a farm and become a plant person. And so I did. And over the years, I studied more and more about farming. And so today I could say you could call me an expert on regenerative farming, organic farming, that sort of thing, sustainable agriculture. And then I got into all these other sciences, ethnobotany and agroforestry and forestry itself, and various horticulture, agricultural arenas. And lo and behold, I turned out to be a naturalist scientist. Cool. And I teach and I write. And so I fulfilled my fourth grade, career path. And it actually realized it sort of took a little turn at one point away from it. But most of my life, I've been on that path. And anyway, it's a great path. I recommend the green path to all your listeners out there. More people need to choose the green path in life and be close to the land.
I agree.
Here.
Well, I also got to, hang out in the woods when I was a kid too. And it seems like a common thread between a lot of people on the plant path. So I guess the other thing is, make sure kids get time in nature. Mm-hmm. So you also, you got your permaculture design course certificate in the 80s, right? Were you one of the first in the US?
Yeah, I was, I think, at the second permaculture course held in the US, 1982, at the Evergreen State College, Olympia, Washington. And our chief instructor was Andrew Jeeves. It was Andrew that did all the drawings in Bill Mollison's early books, including his really big handbook. And so Andrew was the teacher, but Bill Mollison came over himself for 3 days with us where he lectured and talked. And we got to hang out with Bill. And that was great because me and Bill became friends at that point. And later in 1986, I put on a course, Bill's first drylands permaculture course in 1986, and took that course. So, and then in 1988, I told Bill I wanted to start teaching, and I said, "Can I teach permaculture courses, Bill?" And he said, "You have my blessings, son."
Cool.
Or something like that. And so I started my teaching career in permaculture at that point, 88. So I'm. Permaculture is one of the sciences. And of course, as you know, the science of permaculture is interdisciplinary, that it touches on many sciences. So you have to be a real generalist, so to speak, as well as specialist to be a good permaculturist.
So how do you define permaculture with all of these years of experience, and how is it different or intersected with agroforestry and herb farming and these other sciences?
Well, it's more integrated. It covers everything from the energy systems, the water systems, all the plant systems. What are the wildlife or domestic animal interactions that are either desirable or undesirable, and how are all the whole buildings are considered, the social systems, all the inflows into the site, all the outflows. So this is like a family looking at everything that they're bringing in and buying, and then looking at what are they exporting, what kind of garbage or is there what's their waste stream? So what's the incoming stream? What's the waste stream? How can you reduce what you need to bring in and reduce what you need to send out? So you benefit the earth at both ends, and you make your yard more self-reliant. At any rate, so I have this idea that every yard should have a permaculture assessment, and it's kind of like an energy assessment. The energy they come in and they say, oh, you're losing heat through these windows. We can improve it by putting in better windows. We can change your light bulbs and save your energy bill. And so they go through and look at ways for them, the people to be better off in the house. And they usually subsidize that. And sometimes they'll subsidize the installation. So we could use that kind of a service for permaculture. Every house, any house owner could say, you don't force it on people, but you say it's available free. The society pays for it, and there's some good permaculture designers, and they go and look at the house. They say, oh, here's what we can do with the water system, the water that's falling on the land. Here's how we can produce more food. We can make it more fragrant. We can cut out undesirable views. And so we look at the whole ball of wax and that's at the house yard level. And then we could also look at the city level, the county level. Permaculture it can be designed, can be used at every scale, all the way state, national. It's a design process. So that's what I would say. It's what makes it different from just like a thing. It's a design process, and it's a set of principles. And depending on how there's the Mollisonian original principles, and then the Holmgrenian, David Holmgren's principles, and then they've added. Depending who you talk to, I think I have a list all the way up to 46 principles now, because people are adding new ones on. And so you have a set of principles to work with, and you have a design methodology. And so the design methodology, I think, is one of the things that really sets it apart from an interdisciplinary design process. But at any rate, there's just a
I really like that idea of having a permaculture assessment for every home and yard, similar to the energy assessment. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Right. The whole world would become more food self-reliant, more beautiful. People would have a better yard. They wouldn't have to work so much outside. And so then a lot of them would be happier.
Yeah. And there's no one size fits all. Every yard is going to be different. And so that's why there's this plan and system.
Yeah. And every client's different. Some last thing they want is more food, but they really want fragrance or whatever. So, you try to nudge everybody toward being more ecological and more self-reliant. And it's give people the choice and the ability to make the changes. And so, anyway, that's one of my political platforms.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Permaculture assessment for everybody that wants one.
Okay, cool.
I think that's a great platform. Someone should put it on the table. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really great definition of permaculture and way of thinking about it. And I think that like the whole systems part is really what sets it apart. It's integrative. It's as multidisciplinary, and also like every client and every house, every permaculturist is very idiosyncratic, it seems.
We could say every person.
Yeah, that's very true.
But yes, we're maybe more idiosyncratic than average. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, go for it. Sorry.
Well, it seems like in the permaculture community now, I mean, there's kind of this tension between making it more standardized and so on, and accrediting people, and then like the more anarchistic, like citizen scientist kind of thing. And there's also this kind of tension between people who want it to be very strictly based in science and the materialist worldview, and then those who want to, think that science is great and a great tool, but it's not useful for everything. It doesn't, it's great for the material plane, but maybe there are other things going on that might need other tools. So, and I remember when I first met you in 2016, and I talked to you about permaculture and what I was doing, and you were like, go into the woo a little bit more. So I think you're a really great example of somebody who is very grounded in science, but also is open to and very knowledgeable about the woo, the other ways of interacting with the other intelligences and so on. So what for you, how do you define woo, and how do you utilize the woo?
Well, I'm going to start with I always like the thought that scientists say that they've discovered something like, I don't know, 5 or 10% of the matter in the universe, but they can't account for 90 or 95%. There's a less like, no, we just don't know where that is.
Right.
That is the spiritual realm. So of course there's X-rays, there's infrared rays, there's all these rays that our eyes don't see into. We don't really, it's like we don't look into an X-ray world. But that world, anyway, the world of all those solar radiations that are impacting our planet and our bodies all the time, there's all these, you might say, unseen frequencies. And so the earth has all these spiritual dimensions or other frequencies that are related to it. And there's some are more physical and other ones are more, you might say, ethereal, because there's a part of matter called aether or ethers. And that scientists use, I don't know where they think of ethers at the moment, but so some people have the capacity to actually, and all these other spiritual realms are populated with lots of beings. We are not the only intelligent life in the universe. They got that wrong, and of course the spirit beings there's of course legion, and what I'm particularly am involved researching, you might say, is the nature spirits, the beings that actually work with all the species. And so they're part of the whole morphogenetic structure of how things come into manifestation. And so as a plant grows, there's a Rupert Sheldrake talks about this a bit, and you can find it in the, and you look up morphogenetic, what's a term here, morphogenetic fields. The nature spirits are beings that work with those fields. They help I'm trying to go into the science of the woo-woo, or the science of the spiritual realm. So there's a science in the physical realm, and the humans have really focused and are really, you might say, I would say this about science. A lot of scientists these days have been bought off by the system, knowingly or unknowingly, and sort of sold out to sort of a destructive mode of living on the earth. And so just because someone says they're a scientist, I don't start bowing immediately. In fact, I'm likely to be, maybe I'm going to maybe look at them just a little skeptically.
Yeah, what are the corporate interests?
Because I am a scientist, but there's dogma in science, and there's dogmatic scientists, and there's scientists that have sold their soul for the dollar. And so anyway, so there is a whole group of scientists of the spiritual realms, you might say. And so I sort of am a student of some of the scientists that are studying these realms. And what is their spiritual ecology? What are the beings that are there, and what are their various jobs? And so there's a guy named Jaap van Etten who he's using the term, he is a student of metaphysical ecology, the ecology of the metaphysical realm. And so in a sense, that's where, I guess that's where I'm coming from. And not only that, how can we cooperate with these intelligences in nature, which have been known by indigenous people since time immemorial? As there's the idea that fairies were invented in Elizabethan times is far from the truth. They are the spirits of nature, and the land and the seas and the elements have been talked to by indigenous people since time immemorial. I would probably place it about the time humanity started. So it's a long and rich history, this communication with these realms. And it's only been in the last, since the years of scientific materialism, in the last couple hundred years especially, that this has really fallen out of favor. And anyway, so there's just a little bit about the science of the metaphysics and the science of the physical world. And so I have a foot in both of those worlds, which is relatively rare. Some people specialize in one and not the other. And some people specialize in neither.
So what is a fairy?
Well, I'm going to give the definition for a nature spirit, and it's a spirit being that works with nature, and there's all sizes and scales. Once again, so there's very small ones, and then there's larger ones, and the every scale of landscape has you might say a corresponding scale, and it's an annotated beings in a way. So let's look at it this way: if a stream that's flowing into a river has a ferry that's of the stream, and then it flows into the river, and then the river, you might say the river Davic being it has the stream within its orbit, or you might say within its field of consciousness. So, and then the stream itself has different sectors, maybe little waterfalls and little springs that flow into it. Each one of those has a smaller nature spirit being that works with that. And then each of those small ones may have very small elemental beings that it works with within that small. And so, but the consciousness of the larger always encompasses the next level down. So the consciousness of the river includes, and you might say, overseeing consciousness of every stream, every spring, every water feature in the whole landscape. So it's not just restricted to the stem of the river, so to speak, but it's, and so there's all these series of annotated levels of consciousness. And so some humans can tap into and say, oh, I just saw a little fairy fly by. And, those sightings of small fairies are very common, always have been. Now, but less people, you might say, tune into the consciousnesses of the larger beings. And it's usually, these days, it's almost always by accident. Most people, I've run into this story many times. People say, oh, it's just an average housewife or worker just minding my own business, going about life, and poof, all of a sudden I started seeing fairies. And it's sort of like, something clicked on. Most people keep their mouths shut. And you only see it once, but more people see fairies than you might think. But most of them keep their mouths shut because they don't want to be rejected from society, become the black sheep of their family and get disinherited, or be thrown in prison or beaten up by an angry mob or whatever. So people have to be careful about, I'm one of the only people in the United States that's publicly saying they study fairies. Just kidding. But I will say this, there's very few permaculturists that also study, really use the working with these nature spirit realms in their design and in their, not so much the design, but in the execution of their work and utilizing these. You can utilize a communication to affect, you might say, the outcome or how well things work. So, but I will say there's one person that's a particularly good example is Alana Moore is a woman. She's a permaculturist from Australia, has been teaching and writing about permaculture for decades. But more recently, she's moved to Ireland and she's a geomancer. She's really big in the geomancy, dowsing fields.
Okay, that's
books on that. But she has two books on spiritual permaculture. I think I have one on order right now, and I have her earlier one. I think it's called Sensitive Permaculture is the term. Sensitive Permaculture is the title, but it's about permaculture working with nature spirits. And it's not a very well-known book in the permaculture movement, and most permaculturists avoid it like the plague. I mean, I have heard it said, and I won't say which prominent permaculturist said this, but that any permaculturist that espouses religious or spiritual work in their life, should be excommunicated from the permaculture movement. That if you're going to be spiritual, buddy, that is just not allowed in permaculture. Wow. You got to keep your mouth shut. And I wow, that's quite a threat coming from a leader in the permaculture movement.
What is permaculture? A religion like the Catholic Church that can excommunicate people, and if you don't keep the dogma, then
I'm going to come back to something you mentioned earlier, Isaac. You mentioned about the tension between the professional permaculturists who want people to get licenses and recognition, and they have to go through certain schooling, and they really have to prove their stuff to be able to use the term. And then there's people who just want to be great, you say grassroots citizen scientist, and reserve the right for anybody to teach or in a sense to hang out their shingle as a professional designer. Now there's pros and cons, I would say, to both stories. And I'm also a member of the herbal movement, and the same discussion has been going on in the herbal movement for decades. There's been forces that say we want recognition, we want to get government standardized, and that you can't use the term herbalist unless you pass these certain tests. Otherwise, you'll be shut down because we are the professionals and we're going to make good money doing it, and we don't want competition from people that aren't good at it. And so that tension has been around in the herbal movement for many decades and has not been resolved. I assume the same thing will happen in permaculture. There will be both calls for both. And I think it's great to do both. I think it's good to have like the PINA, like the Permaculture Institute of North America, to have like stamp of approval for people. And you can put that as a diploma on your wall in a sense that, you met a certain professional milestones. But at the same time, I'm very much against. I am one of the people that says anybody should be able to teach or hang out their shingle, and that freedom is really important, and that we should have freedom within the permaculture movement. And if somebody's kind of a jerk or does a bad work, I mean, we're not guaranteeing everybody that hangs out a permaculture shingle is going to be good. But we don't want to squelch it and making it expensive for people to actually start using it in a professional way, in a sense. So there are some people that have taken permaculture courses that are very knowledgeable, and there's other ones that take one permaculture course and are just still don't know hardly anything. It's like it's hard to turn a sow's ears into a silk purse overnight.
Right. And it seems like
I'm going to get excommunicated now.
It also seems like the permaculture design course is kind of like more like an initiation than a full like college education or something. It's like you have to be self-motivated and learn on your own and continue the education to really do it.
Mm-hmm. But I would say this would be a good question for everybody that takes a permaculture course. So many people have said that taking their permaculture design course changed their life.
Yeah,
it was, and that certainly changed my life, and I've seen it change the lives of so many people. But then I've seen some other people just kind of like go back to the old system, so to speak. But by and large, permaculture, almost everybody that takes a really good course, and this I would especially say is the case with an in-person course, where you have the whole group energies with you, right, and you get to be with real people. I think it's harder to achieve that initiation, so to speak, at a distance course. But they're valuable, mind you, but taking an in-person course is different. It is. Okay.
I had one more question about the Fae. Other than the social implications, social dangers of working with Fae, where you might be made fun of or put in jail or something like that, are there any other warnings that you have with working with nature spirits, especially for beginners? Because there's a lot of traditional folklore around Fae, specifically like stealing children and realms and these things, and so I can't help but approach that realm cautiously. So I was wondering what you do, and maybe if you're speaking to a beginner who's trying to get into communicating with the Fae or with land spirits, like how do you reach that beginner phase? How do you start that?
I think like you say, to be on the safe side, and I I could go on somewhere, but is to work directly with the plants. You go there and hang out with the plants, and you try to tune into them, and you send them love. You send love to the trees, you send love to the bushes, you send love to your flowers. I mean, you actually practice the art of sending love. And, you know, you can just, of course, it just sort of, some people, you know, just sort of exude it. There's a term, they wear their love on their sleeve. And you hear, that's an old term. I don't know if people even hear it anymore, maybe because hardly anybody does anymore, but that was, it's not true. I could see that, you know, on AC's face there, that, you know, there's some of that in AC for sure. And that, so you wear your love on your sleeve, but you, as you extend love to these plants and the beings, and the animals, of course, are a great way to do this as well. And then try to tune into, you might say, the subtler frequencies, and try to connect up with the nature spirit beings that are associated there. And of course, you can, if the more consciously you do that, that can be helpful. But that's a lot safer way than, for instance, than some other ways of trying to access the spiritual realms, because the spirit realms are not all what we call, you know, they're not all just what we call light filled, etc. There are, you know, the nature spirit realm is completely safe. You can't really go wrong with the nature spirits and the devas.
Okay.
There are, of course, other spirit beings that are out there, and so there, you might say there's a light side and a dark side. As there is in the human world, there's a light side and a dark side, not in the nature spirit realms, but in some of these other spirit realms. Like, you know, there's still a lot of ghosts running around out there and things like that. There's, you know, there's saints and gods and goddesses. There's all kinds of beings running around, and so you do want to. You know, I'm not. So some people go at it through a known spiritual tradition, that there's training and they have teachers and that's a great way. I'm all about, but you don't have to go to teachings. You can tune into plants on your own, and who knows, you may never ever hear anything or see anything, but I guarantee you it'll make you feel better.
Yeah.
Just doing that act of being there and sending out that love, because there's not enough love in the world these days. And that's one way you can give unconditional love. It's really hard to love humans unconditionally, especially the opposite political party. We're not supposed to be able to extend any love. Isn't it horrible that we're being goaded to hate another political party, to somebody that voted differently from you? Oh my God, we're supposed to hate. It's just like, it's just so sad. So anyway, practice sending love is a really good exercise to nature. And so that means you got to spend some time in nature if you're going to go hang out with it. You know, in other words, you know, we need, at any rate, this, it's for some people have been locked down to the point where it's been hard for them to get out in nature, but most, you know, do what you can, folks. It's if they keep you too separated from it too long, yeah, it's a form of collective punishment here going on. Let's see. You wanted me to talk about herb farming and agroforestry a little bit, so you know, let me turn to that a little bit.
Okay.
So maybe this is a good place for me to do my little rant. So I was joking about making it part of my platform to have permaculture assessment available for for any homeowner that wishes. So I'd like to. I was thinking I want to start a Restore the Earth party. I'm just so sick of the current political parties. How about a Restore the Earth party? And I said, you know, and a lot of people would get behind it. I don't know. Would 50% of the people actually think that's a good idea, rather than this, whatever the political allow this nonsense going on? But I said, but it's not the Green Party, because a lot of people are automatic and they say, oh, he wants to join the Green Party. Well, I don't want to join the current Green Party. but I want something that's much broader. And so some of our platforms would be full employment, because there's so much work to do to fix up almost everywhere. It would really greatly increase local food self-sufficiency and food production. There'd be a lot more right livelihood choices for people. We need a lot of seed growers and seed breeders for local seed production, propagation, and nurseries. And so it creates quite a bit of employment to put all this into effect. And then part of the platform, I would say, is 10% of farmland is converted to agroforestry systems. And this is not taking it out of production. It's actually going to increase production. So if we take 10% of the world's more, you might say, more degraded, least productive out of production and put it into agroforestry systems, it'll be much more sustainable. It will build up carbon instead of deplete it. And it will make it a much more productive ecosystem. So in general, I would say that agroforestry tree multiple crop systems produce more per acre than monocultures do, than industrial monocultures. And so, in fact, we can point to lots of whole books of research on this that say yes. And so what they've discovered is by really crunching the numbers and looking at hundreds of agroforestry systems, is that agroforestry systems are at least 1.3 times more productive, oftentimes 1.7 times more productive. And it's not that hard for them to be double the production of the monoculture yield. So, and the ecosystem goes up in health, biodiversity, and carbon sequestration. And so converting more land to agroforestry systems, and of course that creates jobs, because then people have to go out and harvest the agroforestry systems. And it's more of a intensive system rather than, like, you can't run a combine through an agroforestry system. It's got to be done by hand. Yeah. So we want to make it enable more people to get on the land, and that we would go so far as to say anybody that wants to have a place to garden, that is a guaranteed human right. That we may not call it a human right, but basically let's make it available that anybody that wants to garden, there's space to do it in just pretty much every city, even, or the outskirts of a city where you can get people there with a bus, that there is land for the tiller, so to speak. And we want a good extension system for all these new growers. And so in permaculturists would be one of the best people to be the extension agents for this new world restoration movement. So I'm calling this sort of like a worldwide restoration movement, but it's the Restore the Earth Party. Of course, it could be an international party. There was a guy one time, I think his name was something like Henry Liu, a Chinese guy, and he was a really hotshot financial person, and one of those people that helped people that were millionaires invest their money and things like that. But at any rate, he came up with the idea of an international unemployed workers union, a union of all the unemployed people in the whole world for their mutual benefit and getting. And I thought, now there is an idea worth pursuing. That you probably be careful how much he lived to they didn't take him out. He lived to a ripe old age. But at any rate, in espousing that idea, never actually, I don't think ever, the closest thing to it is probably Via Campesina, which is an international organization of more, you might say, peasant farmers and small farmers around the world. But it's stronger in Central America than in most places. But there's but a Restore the Earth international, that's what I'm talking about. So anyway, this would sequester a lot of carbon and would just really help the world be a better place. So anyway, we'll see if we can find somebody to run the political part. Get us registered or anything.
Yeah, that's really cool. I can see a lot of people getting behind it, especially after, just not even just recent years, but the two-party system and, you know, the current political climate is not going to save the world.
No.
It's not going to restore the earth. And a lot of people are really waking up to that and looking for alternatives, but there's not an easy one in place, you know? So I definitely support your efforts there.
Yeah. Do you think you could tell us a little bit more about agroforestry then? Like how do you set up these kind of systems and make them productive?
Well, everyone's different. I've been studying agroforestry since they actually invented the term, which is in the mid-1970s. It was invented in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, a group of people that had just started or were starting the International Center for Research on Agroforestry, or ECRAF. They changed the title a little bit later. But anyway, they started in the mid-70s, and at that point, they came up with the term agroforestry, which was to put trees onto agricultural lands that didn't have trees before. So this could range from orchards. It could range, a lot of times it just meant putting a few, hedgerows or windbreaks or widely dispersed trees on the agricultural land. So most of the land was still devoted to the, you might say, annual cropping, ground story crops. But over time, it became more nuanced, and it was so that it also encompassed very diverse assemblages of trees, shrubs, ground cover plants, vines, etc. What we kind of think of as a classic permaculture system. But they realized, or maybe the world realized gradually, that these agroforestry systems or food forest systems were widespread across the world. They were especially used a lot in India, Kerala, Java. Much of parts of Asia have these complex agroforestry systems. Sri Lanka, for instance, is really notable. But they had old systems in the Guatemalans, the Mayans, the Aztecs, and in the eastern U.S. woodland people also had agroforestry systems here that they managed with your walnuts and your oaks and your chestnuts and various fruits. And so we have all these, you might say, traditional and ancient agroforestry systems, and now we're trying to learn from them and create new ones. So we're taking those traditional knowledge and our permaculture knowledge, and we're also there's also, you might say, agricultural scientists also working on this agroforestry. So it's sort of a combination. I think the combining of those three streams of thought, I think, is really where agroforestry really becomes especially great. And, just coming at it from the academic sense or the scientist sense, just coming at it from permaculture or just coming at it from traditional, if you know all three, if you have a foot in all three of those worlds, you are going to be really a useful person in terms of designing these kinds of things. So I've been working and specializing in this for quite a few years, and we just need so many more people to take up agroforestry as a profession. It sounds a little better than permaculture to a lot of people's ears, and so because it's a scientific discipline that you can take at university. So anyway, so there's three streams of thought that come together for agroforestry.
Yeah, we saw a video recently of you visiting an agroforestry site that you planted 25 years ago that kind of went to different hands and was a little bit more feral. And I'm wondering what it was like for you. This is our second year at our herb farm. We've planted a bunch of trees and perennial plants and things like that. But what was it like for you to go back to that site and see all of the different changes, and what would you do differently?
Well, I would manage it really well.
Yeah.
But the thing is, see, I managed the system for 9 years, and then I sold the planting to a young couple, friends, and then later on, they sold it to another person, and none of them. And then eventually he started his own farm somewhere else, and gradually pulled out of there. So that place was gradually you say went into more stages of abandonment. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I was doing in that video. And I would recommend that. It's a pretty cool video.
It's so cool.
I got some good kudos from like Jason Gearhart, for instance. You know, there's some good permaculturists that have looked at that and said, right on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's interesting to see a permaculture system relatively, like it was a medicinal agroforestry system. It was deliberately planted to produce medicine. Mm-hmm. I had it up to 200 species before I left the project.
Wow.
And there's probably maybe 100 persisting today after the abandonment period. And you know, so at any rate, what was I going to say about it? The idea, and mine is not alone. If we looked around the world at permaculture planted systems, that system planted by permaculturists, however, you know, they're going to vary in quality, that have been abandoned. Mm-hmm. And I know of, and there's dozens, and I'm sure by now hundreds, perhaps thousands of abandoned permaculture plantings out there. And somebody that really took the time to go and look at all of them, because I see pictures of it in various videos. They say, oh, Bill Mollison might walk around and say, oh, this place was abandoned 5 years ago, and just look, it's just dripping with food.
Yeah.
And still, so my system has been abandoned, but it's still producing a lot of biomass. It's functioning very well ecologically. The yields are less now than they were when it was being managed, but I'm going to work with it and gradually increase the yields again. So the idea that you can set up a system, and this is where we go into ecosystem restoration. Mine is, I'd like to do intensively managed systems, but one of the goals of an ecosystem restoration is to go into wild lands or degraded landscapes and put in systems that can make it on their own with just some follow-up care, but not intensive management or anything, but just enough follow-up care to get things surviving and off for a couple of years. There's a system called Grow Oasis, GRO Oasis. I think is the right term. You can look it up on Google it or look at YouTube's, and it's a plastic bucket system, a little bit of a runoff pan. So whenever it does rain, the water filters down right to the base of a seedling. It's a nice system. But at any rate, how do we establish agroforestry blends into restoration, ecosystem restoration, where you're not doing much management, but you have to be able to establish things in a tough situation with minimal resources and follow-up. Now that takes a anyway, slightly different approach, but can also be looked at through a permaculture viewpoint. But it also, people that specialize in ecosystem restoration can do that. And I see we're getting closer to our hour here, but not quite yet. 15 minutes or so more. What do you think?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, and this is all sounding really great.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of the things that were on our list, so that's really cool.
Oh, maybe a little bit more about herb farming. You mentioned
that was the next thing. Yeah.
So I've been farming medicinal herbs for 25 years commercially. I of course started growing herbs way back in my early career of growing things. But I really specialized, and now am producing a lot of medicinal herbs on what I call micro farming. So I'm farming a small footprint of land and getting it intensively and getting high production. And I'm currently, last year we were able to make the equivalent of $160,000 an acre. Wow. on our site. And I remember when I've been reading about how much you can make on an acre for a long time. Booker T. Watley, I think, claimed something like 500,000 on an acre. And I think it was Eddie, they're on Cape Cod. And I'm blanking on her name, but she claims something along those lines too. I've heard 200,000 an acre in intensive urban permaculture systems, or just even microgreens and that kind of thing. And I remember years ago, a farmer who was a really good young farmer. He really knew his stuff, and he was really at the top of his, well, maybe not at the top of his game, but he really figured it out. He says, I can make $80,000, this is gross, an acre if things go well. That's what I would be aiming for these days for an acre of vegetables. And I said to myself, okay, that's a pretty high bar there, you know, and so I've been keeping track, and so I'm happy to say that you know, and you hear of Elliot Coleman, I think, is somewhere around the order of 150,000 an acre or something along those lines, maybe even more. He's probably got to be one of the highest income per acre guys on your East Coast back there.
Yeah,
or people like him. And so these big numbers are possible with really good intensive management and you know, selling your stuff. And so what it makes me realize is that it'd be really easy for any area to be self-reliant in its herbal needs. And right now, a certain percentage of the population uses medicinal plants in various forms. And right now, very few places are producing much. And so there's centers of production in the world, Eastern, you know, Bulgaria and parts of Eastern Europe and parts of India, China, you know, there's Egypt is a big source. So there's these world sources, and then there are US domestic sources, but by and large, the idea of local food is really big now, but local medicine and local herbs, you know, not many people talk about that yet. So that's one thing every region and should consider, how can it be more self-reliant in herbs. And one day, here's a scenario. One day, all the global infrastructure starts breaking, shipping infrastructure starts breaking down, and they can't get pharmaceuticals to people. They're cut off from their pharmaceuticals. At one point, I spent time on Kauai, and we looked at if the island was cut off from its supply of pharmaceuticals, there would be all of a sudden this big demand for people that would calm people's hearts down, or to help people with respiratory illnesses, et cetera, that they're currently using pharmaceuticals for. What herbs could you go to replace those pharmaceuticals, or what's available, especially right now in the wild, so that you don't say, well, in a couple of years, we'll produce what you need. No, what can you provide next week when they are cut off from their supplies that will help them survive in a healthier fashion? And so you might say that there should be a part of emergency planning should be, could be, and I don't think anybody could argue with the idea that it's good to know what things will help, like thin people's blood, or what are all the health conditions people take pharmaceuticals for? Keep viruses at bay. They're taking antivirals, or they're taking barbiturates, heaven forbid. But there's a lot of people on uppers and downers, et cetera, and there's herbal things that are analogs. So what are the herbal analogs to the pharmaceuticals, and how can we be ready to ramp up production in the case of a shutoff? Mm-hmm. And that's something that could be, you know, every area could study that. And if they did that, more of them would want to start little herb farms. Yeah. There is right now huge amounts of people that want to start small herb farms in the US, because I teach that. I do workshops on micro farming medicinal plants. And I see, you know, the numbers of medicinal herb farms have really been on the rise in North America. It's not an easy road to hoe necessarily, but there's a lot more interest, and I'm, of course, applauding that interest out there, folks. Grow more herbs on the family level, and then some of you on the commercial level.
Yeah, it's a little easier than veggies at times, because some, you know, perennial herbs take care of themselves often.
Mm-hmm. Right. They're actually, you know, I grew vegetables for years. I was a vegetable farmer, big long rows of carrots and stuff, and corn. You know, I was a regular vegetable. But after a while, I don't know, I guess I got a little bored, and I wanted to branch out. And so that's when I really started going into trees and shrubs and perennial crops. And that's pretty much coincided with, I started farming in 72, got into permaculture at 80 and 81. So 9 years of vegetable farming. And then I sort of discovered, aha, there's much more to the world than vegetables.
Yeah.
And growing. And so I branched out. I've worked with over 1,000 species of plants now. I actually counted them up at one point.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's so diverse, and it's so much diversiculture is not only good for the land, it's actually good for the grower too. Who wants to get
it's more fun.
Yeah.
So how do you make that much money per acre? Like besides growing a lot of plants together intensively, like how do you sell all the herbs? How do you process them on site, and then you know what are the other parts to that?
Well, there's several income streams. We sell fresh herbs, and we dry some and sell dried herbs. And this is pretty much wholesale. We have a little bit of retail, but we're mostly wholesale. And then I also harvest seeds. I do a lot of seed production as well. So a lot of the herbs, you're still going to you can get seed production and the crops sometimes, or sometimes you just let part of the crop go to seed so that I have seed production. And then we also have a lot of propagation material. So all these people that want to start new herb farms, we sell them the little rhizomes and roots and plant divisions so that they can start their own planting. So we're a source of propagation material. So we also have that to sell, and we do a little bit retail. So that's, it's good to have multiple marketing angles.
The first system is a resilient system, as they say.
Yep.
So do you have big old rows of herbs like carrots, or what does your herb farm look like?
You should, if you go to my YouTube channel, I have 3 YouTube channels right now, but especially if you go to the Anna Palata one, or Friends of the Trees, or Global Earth Repair Foundation, but that's mostly more like the Global Earth Repair scene. But the Anna Palata is Pallotta, double L's and double T, Palata, Pal, P-A, and she has done a lot of YouTubes of my farm. And so you can look up, I think, Agroforestry there. I think there's various playlists there. There's Hugo Cultures, but anyway, look for the farming videos, and you can see, and I'll tour people through my main planting right now, the one that's producing that kind of that income level. You can, I just have 1/4 acre in this one planting. This year we're going to increase it by half again. The most I've ever had in this system is 2 acres. So when I say intensive systems, I mean, people think of farms like 40 acres and hundreds of acres and thousands of acres. I just heard that Bill Gates is the largest landowner in the United States, I think it was 425,000 acres or something. I don't remember the exact figure, but he was anyway. So some people want big landownings. 2 acres is the most I've ever been able to manage at any one time. I've reached that a couple times in my life. If I stayed in one place long enough, I bet I could get up to 3. But anyway, I'm talking intensive production, so you don't need large amounts of land to make your living. Where was I going with that? Farming. Anyway,
yeah, we'll link some of your YouTube videos. It's amazing to see all those plants together. And they're so vibrant, and they grow. I mean, I don't know if it's because you're in Oregon, but yeah, how do you?
Because I love the plants, and I have lots of fairies helping me. Yeah. That's right. It might help your bottom line, folks. If you can add an extra 10 grand or so by being friendly to the fairies, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, it's in your self-interest.
Yeah.
So we're almost here at the end. Just before we leave you, do you have any advice for homesteaders, farmers, home gardeners just starting out on this path?
Do some research. Watch these days. There's so many great YouTubes out there, and it's really a nice way to get some education without paying too much money. Or you can come and go. You can go down various rabbit holes. and of course, I read a lot of books. That's useful too. But I would say this, start small and take care of what you plant. A lot of people make the mistake of planting more than they can adequately care for. And so if you want to be able to give an adequate follow-up care to what you do put in so that it turns out well. My goal is that everything I plant does really well and grows fast and vigorously as the species is able to, is sort of, you might say, maximizing its potential. That is being able to do that with everything you plant. It's much more fun and inspiring to be a successful gardener than to be a bad gardener and
So
fail,
small.
allow your stuff die. And so it takes some years to really get good at it. So you know, after 4 years, you should really have the basics down, and then it's pretty good sailing from there on. So, but anyway, so you got to sort of like put in the early years, but don't, take really good care of what you have. And even at that, I do lose, a small percentage of things I put in don't work or die, or the soil wasn't quite right or something, but it's probably somewhere around the range of, 5% or less of what I attempt doesn't do well. I'm almost everything I do does well. I guess having a green thumb and decades of experience actually does help folks.
Really?
Yeah.
As a surprise.
Are there, just real quick, are there any plants specifically that you just love and are really excited about right now and that you can't imagine not having at your herb farm? I know it's kind of like asking an farmer what you're like a
Well, actually, I have a list of what. Yes, thank you. Okay. Well, every site's different, but almost everybody I think could benefit from having sweet clover where they can, where the climate's okay for sweet clover. Just throwing some of that seed around, it's really cheap. It's the second year before you really start getting a lot of blooms, but it doesn't run like white clover is something I keep out of most of my, pretty much keep out of my system because it doesn't work well in beds. Some people use it as a ground cover, but not me. But I like red clover because it stays in one spot, and it will maybe spread by seed, but it's easy to weed relatively. It's got one basal root if I need to take it out, but it's that red clover is a really great medicine. Almost everybody benefit from it. Another is nettles. It's like, do you have enough? Do you have a place where people don't go? You can't put it you don't want to put it next to a path or somewhere where next to the kids' playground or anything. But is there somewhere in your system you can put some nettle? Because nettle is, again, just a wonderful food. It's a great soil builder. There's a lot of benefit to that. Those are two things. And it's also pretty easy to grow a little bit of an oat patch. Just grow a little patch of oats, and you can harvest it for oat straw. You can get some milky oats. And almost everybody's going to benefit from some milky oats and oat straw in their diet or in their tea regime. So that'll help your nervous system, and it will help keep you more mineralized.
Yeah, those are 3 great nutritive herbs there.
Yeah, I love milky oats.
Yeah, and nettles.
I love
nettles.
all 3, actually. Yeah. Cool.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad that we got to talk to you. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share with folks before we end?
Well, maybe have me back in about a year or so. Cycle me through again.
Yeah.
Good luck on your projects there and helping get good information out to the world and all your listeners, and may there be more of them.
Thank you.
And everybody should do something to help restore the earth around them. Like I like to say, if you breathe air and you drink water and you eat food, pay something back to Mother Earth, and you do some of it physically. Okay, yeah. Well, I bet most of your listeners are doing that just fine. So I love preaching to the choir. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, it's the best.
Well, thank you so much again, Michael, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, yeah, tell them to look up those YouTube channels, Friends of the Trees and Anna Pilata and Global Earth Repair.
Cool, yeah. We'll definitely link them in the show notes.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.